personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, all the way from New Jersey, Vikas Malhotra. He is the founder and CEO of WOPLLI Technologies. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you for having me on this show.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to meet you and meet your audience.
Yeah. Well, I thought it would be great. I invited you to be a guest on the show. I love the things that you post and the way that you talk about data and digital life. You talk about it like a trust fabric for life. And I love to sort of get your thoughts on all that. But before we get started, why don't you tell us a bit about your technology journey, why you decided to start WOPLLI, and also how you got an interest in privacy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Debbie, for that question. I started my journey in mid-90s, and I'm a technologist and an engineer by training. A lot of work in electronics and telecommunication during my education time frame. And I got into this whole area of digital technologies and system integration, working with many things, all up and down the OSI, ISO OSI layer. And during the time, I ended up in some places where I got the opportunity to be the pioneer and affect some of the new paradigms in the technology areas. So early on, worked in the networking side of the things, emails, systems, and application systems. And then in early 2000s, I was actually, bringing up something called as an application service provider, which was precursor to the cloud services. And from around 2008 timeframe, I got an opportunity to bring the cloud technologies at Microsoft from 0 to 1 situation. And in doing so, I got exposed to many areas which were related to think of like, how the internet works, how cybersecurity works, privacy works. I was leading a program around trust with transparency at Microsoft Office 365. And I was, also, in fact, just going back to late 1990s, I, in fact, was a situation where there was very first attack, I believe, of and virus attack that happened, which was the Melissa virus, 1999 timeframe. I was there on ground, working to mitigate that kind of a situation. So a lot of these things have happened over the years, and I lately at Microsoft, I spent all good technology working through a lot of areas. But then in early 2021, I realized that the cybersecurity and the privacy problems of the world are not going to just go away the way things are situated today. And it required some new form of thinking, new form of building things. And that is where what led to the formation of WOPLLI Technologies. I came out of the corporate world, so to say, and formed WOPLLI Technologies, whose vision is to make our experiences as we work, play, learn, live to be safe, fair, and trusted. Work, play, learn, live are our experiences, as I highlighted, and that is how the word WOPLLI has been formed. So it's a combination of those 4 words.
Wow, that's really cool. Really cool. I would love to talk a bit about, let's talk about trust. trust in the internet. So I think it's cool that you were so early in your career going from computing where people were, let's say computing in ways where they were doing it like on premise within organizations, developing technology where people are in the cloud. And I feel like a lot of people who are in the cloud, or especially around kind of security, sometimes they still have that idea. They're trying to use methods that they use when data was on premise, right, and not as ubiquitous in the cloud. It just doesn't work. It just is not a fit there. So tell me about, the things that you were seeing as companies were moving data from on-prem into the cloud, and sort of what the challenges that are created as a result of that, and how kind of WOPLLI deals with that.
That's a good question. Debbie, one thing that has happened with the cloud, world coming together, is that previously, when as you noted, that when the organizations were putting their data, right, or creating their data, it was all under their control. And now there is always obviously a debate about whose data it is, whether it is a person's data or whether it is an organization's data, but organizations were controlling it, at least in their on-premises environment. With the cloud world, that changed. So now there was this notion of putting data in somebody else's data center, which were these cloud service providers, and that led to, in fact, a new paradigm of think of as a shared services model on how companies should view their responsibilities versus the cloud service providers' responsibilities, and where that line could be drawn between how the risk management is done, how the compliance is done, and who holds what from the responsibility standpoint. As part of my experience at Microsoft, in fact, I had an opportunity to draw some of those paradigms in 2010, 2011 timeframe, when we were thinking through this, and there are some shared services model that were drawn out, and I have been in the front line in creating those and presenting to the world. And now it is out there. So it has led to a change in how companies would view their their responsibilities and the risk models, and where they're how they would view who to trust versus not to trust. And a big thing that has happened in the last decade or so is people have been trying to figure out how they can trust their particular cloud service provider. Now cloud comes in different ways. There are SaaS providers, there are commercial services, then there are and you can think of IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and whatnot. And placing that trust on and how the data is being processed in those different places, that is a big challenge. And people go to different degrees, and companies go to different degrees based upon their regulatory stance, or what they want out of what kind of compliance they want to implement. To go and review these places, but then not every cloud service or every service is actually transparent enough to provide that information either. So from a WOPLLI perspective, we think that the current system requires some change from the perspective of giving control to the data provider or the data who is supposed to hold the data, and do it in a way where the information could be stored and leverage this like mass scale cloud establishments, but still the data is in the control of who that data should be with, right? And that is where one of the principles that we have put out there is distribution of data processing across different vendors, and across various layers, including from the compute to going up to storage to the application side.
So what problem does your organization, WOPLLI, help organizations solve?
That's a great question. So we are at an early stage a startup right now, and we are currently working in three wide areas, given our vision. And those three areas, Debbie, are first is we are building a new platform. And this platform is going to be a trusted platform of verified things that people can interact with. And we are basing this platform on the 5 architecture principles that we have laid out, which I will go in a little later. The second area that we are working in is we are affecting and contributing to and also creating new standards and frameworks with our work at organizations like Trust Over IP Foundation, Decentralized Identity Foundation, IEEE, NIST, etc. And the third area, which we have to really do some more work on, in fact, at this point of time, is we want to create an alliance, a global alliance between academia, public, and private on a center of excellence for digital trust. So I will make a call out for anybody who would want to join us in this center of excellence trust journey, to contact me. Now coming back to the first one, which is where I spoke about the principles, and we have found 5 architecture principles. First one is human centricity, which essentially is to provide better control or control to a human being on their data and their experiences. Number 2 is decentralization in identifiers. Number 3 is distribution in data processing across various layers and architectures. Number 4 is heterogeneity in the control providers and control assessors. And number 5 is the verification of things and creating the self-healing mechanisms within the architectures. So those are the 5 principles that we have adopted. And we are, as I said, we are looking to create a platform around these things. I will not go into the detail of what that platform will actually do. We have a grand vision, and we are executing on it. And and the other 2 things, which is the standards and frameworks and the center of excellence.
Excellent. I would love to talk with you about human centricity. I love that you put it that way. So much of the business world hasn't been focused on the human. It's really been focused on the customer and what we can sell someone. So it hasn't been thought about in terms of the benefit and also the harm to humans. And so I think what you're proposing is the way of the future, is the way that companies have to be, but it's the opposite of the way that companies are today, which is very shareholder centric, centered on the business and what they can do with data and information, not really centered on the human. And I feel like this is definitely the wave of the future. But tell me why human centricity is very important to, your principles and the way that you are working.
Great question, Debbie, and thank you so much for honing on to that point. So, as you said, the world has been very focused on the word customer centricity, or user centricity, or consumer centricity. And all of those things actually assume that somebody is going to become your customer and somehow you're going to manage them differently at that point of time. On the other hand, what we are proposing is that we got to look at human and the human experience. And even if they are not the paying customer at a given point of time, you got to provide them with the right services. And we're talking in the digital context, obviously, which you would provide in the as and when they become the paying customers as well. We should not be discriminating between the two. The experience should be continuous, sort of a continuous stream over there. Now, where does this thing has an effect is that if you consider that people have, many organizations, many companies, many services have considered a paying customer kind of a paradigm, and there has been a notion that if people are getting free services, then their data is essentially up for grabs, and or we can do, we can offer whatever, they and people will just take it because it's for free, and that's not the way to look at it. The data of a person is not for grabs if they are not, paying customers. I believe that that is actually the root of why we are in such privacy kind of problems today, because we have been thinking that we have rights to a person's data, and we can take that data and do anything with it. As long as a person is getting some free services and stuff, and we are trying to, as you said, yes, it's a very opposite point of view, but I believe the solution for these privacy problems and the data processing problems that we are dealing with in the world today, in the digital world today, I think the solutions lie in the understanding that we have to look at from a human-centric standpoint.
Excellent. I also want to talk with you about identity. So identity is something I like to talk about because it is so centered on the human, right? So unfortunately, the way the businesses have gone about identity is, like you said, as a user and customer type of issue. But identity is a lot deeper than that. So tell me about what's happening in the identity space that you think needs to change going forward to, make this kind of human-centric thing work.
Yeah. So there have been 3 shifts actually in the digital identity world. And there is a lot of thinking going on right now around the world, including at the United Nations. They're discussing legal identity and all those aspects. But at a broad level, there are 3 changes that have happened. First, there was something called as centralized identity systems. Think of we used to have mainframes in 80s, 90s timeframe. And there was a person would walk up to a certain console, and they would put their identity information to log into that console. So it was a very centralized mechanism, and that kind of a mechanism kept on going. Obviously, you were just logging back and forth into that particular place. Then came something called as federated identity systems, which is where now there were new identities solutions or different setups were done by different companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, et cetera, et cetera. And but they created these centralized islands of identity systems where they could talk to each other, but then everybody is essentially trying to become the key trust provider in the sense among everybody else, right? That is a federated identity system. And that has been in existence for about 10 to 15 years now. And now what we are talking about is something called as a decentralized identifiers or decentralized identity systems, where along with taking it along with something called a self-sovereign identity, what we are saying is that a person is actually in control of their identifiers. And there are some organizations, think of like your licensing organization or the passport organization, and they issue these something called as verifiable credentials or identifiers to you, but only you have access to that information, nobody else has. And the architecture is such that the wallet or in that scenario, only you are the holder of it. And then you can produce those verifiable credentials in front of the verifiers out there. So they can verify you with the minimum amount of information that you can produce using zero knowledge proofs. And this kind of a scheme can help a person not only have control on their own personal data as it is getting stored inside their wallet, but it can also help them control the data flow as the data is going to the verifiers and whoever it is. So now in this whole situation, so what is the difference from the existing identity systems? The difference is that in the current identity systems, the issuer of an identity or the creator of an identity or identifier and the verifier of the identity are many times one and the same organization. Think of like Google, right? So you create a Google account. So they are issuing you some sort of a username password, but then you are also being verified against their own systems, et cetera, et cetera. So they are holding your information also. So that's the second thing. They are also taking the information, and there is a whole debate about how that information is used, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, in the self-sovereign identifier world and verifiable credentials, you are holding the information inside your wallet, nobody else's. And as far as the issuer of the credentials is concerned and the verifiable of credentials are concerned, they are in most cases separate bodies. They are separate organizations, and that leads to a question of how you would form trust between those two parties without them being in the direct connection. And that is what the Trust over IP Foundation and those architectures are trying to create. So this is the new form of identifier systems which are being brought to the world now.
I want to back up a bit. I obviously know what self-sovereign identity is, but I would love for you to explain to the audience what it is. So for me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you have a more eloquent way to put it. I think of self-sovereign identity as almost like an individual is kind of a bank of their own data, and then they choose how they share it. But I understand your point, which is there has to be kind of some verification or authentication that happens. And so how do you have people control or have agency over their own data as if they're a bank? And how do these other organizations verify or trust kind of that identification? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So self-sovereign identity, as the word suggests, first of all, is think of like it's a self-sovereign, right? It's self-sovereign. It is like you are holding your wallet, and the information that is inside that wallet is only accessible by you. So that is the first thing. So that's what is meant by self-sovereign part of it. Now, let us say Debbie has a wallet, a SSI wallet, and she has something to hold now, right? So she's a holder of this wallet. And what is she going to hold inside that wallet? That becomes the question, right? It is, again, a part of the verification scheme, authentication, authorization, and single sign-on, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how would you go about doing that is that think of like there are organizations that would issue some form of identifiers to them. In our physical world today, these things happen in paper form, for example. Licenses get issued to us. Passports get issued to us. We have paper copies of those things, birth certificates, et cetera, et cetera. And think of these getting converted into a digital form, which are called as verifiable credentials, and only getting issued inside your wallet, to which only Debbie has access to. Yeah, and on the other hand, there is a verifier organization. Now, let us say you are going to the airport and you are taking an international flight and you want to produce your passport. And when you show up at that kiosk, they would want to see your passport, and you bring out your self-sovereign identity wallet, and there is a whole mechanism with only the public keys going into an external database. So there is like a public key kind of a verifiable database like blockchain, which is used to figure out the PKI, the public key of the issuer, and the verifier uses that to read the document that is personal and private to Debbie inside her SSI wallet. Now, also one other thing over here is that Debbie doesn't need to produce more information than actually what is desired. So if all that is needed to be confirmed is that you are a United States national, and the birth date, et cetera, and whether the passport is valid or not, you don't have to produce your name and this and that and everything else. So different situations can require different kinds of verification. But Debbie can control, what kind of information gets produced and gets verified by the verifier as well. So in all of the situation, the information, the actual information is personal inside the SSI wallet of Debbie, and there is a external database like blockchain that is being used to exchange the public keys between the issuer and the verifier.
That's an excellent description of it. Let's talk about privacy here. So I think the example you gave was a really good one, especially when I think about privacy. So when I think about privacy, I think about it as agency to decide what you do or don't want to share. So your example about someone having like a passport or going to a border, and so the person, they just need to know that you are eligible, right, to be able to cross that border. They don't need to know your address or, these other bits of information. So for me, privacy is about sharing, deciding what you want to share or what you don't want to share, and then your question, which is even a bigger one, is like, what is necessary to be able to do this transaction? Where what we're seeing now is that companies, they've just collect so much data. And so a lot of it is very unnecessary. You don't need to know all that to be able to do, these functions. So tell me about how privacy sort of goes in there, and then how trust is sort of interwoven in all those processes.
Yeah. So privacy, as I said, privacy becomes the key output of this whole situation because one is that the data is private to Debbie in this particular situation is personal inside your SSI wallet, and then on top of it, you can control what data gets shared, right? And if there are proper controls established, like, okay, what is the minimum amount of information that a verifier needs to get Debbie to the next thing, then you can establish the minimal data exchange. So data minimization is achieved through this, right? You can put more controls around this whole situation as well. Around the data processing and whatnot, there could be situations that you could put. Debbie can probably define, whether wherever the data is getting shared with the verifier, what kind of processing can happen on that data. But that's the second part of the problem. But at the minimal level, it changes the equation that, like, let's say you're going to a website, which is like taking all your information as you go in there, and then you are establishing an account for every website to interact with them. It solves for both of those issues. One is with your self-sovereign identity wallet, you do not have to create another account. You could use that wallet to actually authenticate and get authorized to do some functions inside a website or some service. And then you can also have control on what data you share to get to that authentication, right? And there's going to be a negotiation over here, depending upon the different parties in the mix. But those kind of negotiation model can be established using this SSI wallet and verifiable credential scheme.
Well, let's talk about benefit to organizations. So what we see now, organizations that sort of collect data indiscriminately, they're not happy about moves in this direction because they get to collect less data, right? But then on the other hand, if you really want to build that trust, I think you need to, and what we're seeing with data privacy regulations around the world, you have to have a purpose. You have to have a reason for wanting that data to begin with. And so to me, that helps to engender that trust. But let's talk about the benefits in terms of, for example, let's say, this is a good example that my friends in identity like to use. So if I have to go to a store in the US to buy alcohol, you have to be 18 years old in the US to buy alcohol. Now, the person that I am interacting with to make this purchase, they don't need to know my name. They don't need to know my address. They don't even need to know my date of birth. They just need to know, am I over 18 or not, right? So to me, this is the type of data exchange that can be achieved in identity systems in the way that you're talking about self-sovereign identity. But then on the flip side, it can help organizations because it should, speed transactions, first of all. It can limit their data risk because they're not collecting more data than they need, and then it can help engender trust. So talk to me a little bit what you think about what are the benefits for organizations to be able to move in this direction.
You are absolutely right. And in fact, that example that you just took, it has been used so many times to explain this kind of a situation. So you can prove that you're above 18 without actually telling your date of birth or your name or your address, which is what you actually do when you flash your license in front of the bar owner. So minimum amount of data exchange. The benefits, I think, are things like one thing you just mentioned over here is that there is better clarity on what data is actually getting collected and how it is being processed. Today, organizations are confused. They collect more data than they actually need to collect. It is not useful for their business anyways, that additional data. And and the other side of the problem is that data ends up in wrong hands and stuff and leads to other problems. So they will have better clarity on what data is being collected and how it is being processed, so that they can produce in front of their regulators or whoever the case is to show their compliance to whatever regulations are going on. So it helps with the GDPR side of the things. Now, the other benefit is that if they're minimizing the data collection, obviously, they could be collecting for whatever is required by their business, right? And making it clear to the person that this is being done, and as long as that whole transparency is there in the system, that is needed. But it is leading to a data minimization. Now your processing costs for that data go down as well, because you're collecting less to the point, and you have better control on how you're going to process it and how you're going to store it and how you're going to, more importantly, secure it. Because one side effect of all this data collection is that the data is collected, and now it is forming these data pockets, essentially, which is sort of a honeypot for the hackers to come in and scoop that data away. So the third benefit, I would say, is that it will lead to better cybersecurity situations, like as a result of this. We have to put other controls from the cybersecurity standpoint. This is not the only control that will lead to that situation, but less data getting out is better than getting all data, if you're going to end up in that situation.
Absolutely. And then to that point, let's say if the only data that you're collecting is that someone came into your establishment that was over 18 and bought alcohol, if someone breached that, what did they get? They didn't get anything. Like, there's no value to that data outside of kind of your transaction with the individual, which is really what you want at the end of the day. So you want, that's all correct. You need. That's all you really need to be able to do kind of your job and do your business, and then not increasing the risk. So one thing about the cloud, I love your thoughts. I think one thing that the cloud has done is turn people more so into digital pack rats. So because we have as much space as we want to buy, people don't purge things. And from a privacy perspective, I always tell organizations, people get in trouble based on what they collect and how long they keep it, right? So if you're, in this example, if you can do a transaction where you don't need to retain the data or collect it in the first place, you're going to be in a better situation. But if you have to collect it, pare down, think about what are the essential things I really need to collect. And then on the retention part, make sure it's not an open-ended retention period. So I tell organizations, data that has a low business value often has a very high business risk, especially as it relates to privacy. So what are your thoughts about that?
I totally agree with you, Debbie. It's data retention has to be thought by the organizations. What we are talking of over here is that don't do the data minimization, so that you don't have to be thinking about that data retention to that extent as you're doing today. So take care of this data flow problem right at the root first, and then obviously you have to put the data retention kind of policies as well to take care of privacy. And I will just add to this: think from a human perspective. It's like think of the person you are trying to serve as a human, and if you were in that situation, have an empathy towards that situation. So like it's their data, and you could be on the other end as well.
That's a great answer. I love that. So if it were the world according to Vikas, and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for kind of privacy or data handling or in identity? What would be your wish?
My wish would be that that a person is actually in control of their data. and that's both while it is being stored. So that is where the self-sovereign identifiers scheme comes in, and also when it is in flow and it is being exchanged with the other parties. And I think that has so many. This whole situation has so many benefits to the not only to the privacy of a person, or establishing better privacy parameters of for a person, but also will lead to better security models, and taken along with some other controls that we are bringing out. It will essentially lead to a better data management capabilities in our digital worlds, and I think that's one of the bases of the trust problem. This whole situation is one of the bases of why we are seeing so many trust issues. People not trusting this and that and whatnot. I also believe that we should not be having so many different identities in different systems. An average person, I think there's been some study on this, average person holds more than 85 accounts, and then there are 85 passwords that are associated with that as well. And nobody remembers that. I know there are organizations who are doing this single sign-on and stuff like that. But what if that single sign-on was established with a self-sovereign identifier, rather than something which is like, there are 100 accounts and now I'm going to create another repository of, those accounts and passwords. So that is what my world looks like. It has to be more decentralized, and it has to be more human-centric, taking human centricity in the designs. And then, there are other architecture principles which will help enable this world as well.
Right. I always think of, when you say decentralized, basically you're thinking about decentralizing it from the organization, but you're really centralizing it to the human.
Decentralized down to the human.
Right.
And that we got to look at a picture. In fact, there was a recent discussion by a person named Doc Searles, and he painted the picture of internet, decentralized internet, as an individual dots that are being represented on a picture, rather than the dots that are interconnected with each other. And if you look from our real physical being kind of a perspective, that is how we work. That is how we behave as human beings. We are dots, and we connect with each other as and when needed. We and we exchange information, etc., etc. But we are not always connected with each other, right? So we have to think of this as a decentralized, at least from the identity standpoint. It has to be a decentralized identifier mechanism that you are in control. And yes, you connect with other parties as and when needed for either the issuance of what your credentials are, or for the verification side of the things. But you're not always connected.
Yeah, I agree. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This is great. I love this conversation, and I like what you're doing. So definitely keep me updated on what you're doing. I would love to be able to share that with other people as well.
Thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you for the invitation to your podcast. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.